Hana walked through the metal corridors of Kepler's Rest with her small bag slung over her shoulder. The trading station was huge, bigger than any space station she had seen before. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved around her, some as tall as trees, others with more arms than she could count. The air smelled like fuel and spices from 100 different worlds. Strange sounds filled the space, clicking, growling, and languages she did not understand. She was tired from the long journey from Earth's outer colonies. Her back hurt from sleeping in the cramped transport ship for 3 weeks. But she had work to do. The terraforming project on Kepler 442b needed contractors, and the best ones came to this station. Her boss had sent her here because she was good at her job, even if she looked nothing like what most aliens expected from humans. The cantina was easy to find. Bright lights and loud voices came from the open doorway. Hana stepped inside and looked around. The ceiling was high, maybe 20 feet up. Tables and chairs of different sizes filled the room to fit all kinds of alien bodies. Some creatures sat on the floor because they were too big for furniture. Others hung from the ceiling on web-like structures. At the far end of the room, she saw her targets. 3 alien contractors sat around a large round table. She had studied their files during the trip. Korvac was a Vorthak, one of the warrior species from the inner rim. His body looked like it was made of black armor with spikes coming out of his shoulders and back. His claws were as long as her fingers. Next to him sat Threx, a Grimaldi merchant with 4 thick arms and gray skin that looked like stone. The third was Velith, a Nexari scout. Her body was thin and sharp with blade-like parts sticking out from her arms and legs. These 3 controlled the biggest construction companies in this part of the galaxy. If she could get them to work on the terraforming project, it would be done in half the time and for a good price. Without them, she would have to find smaller companies that might not do as good a job. Hana walked toward their table. Her boots made small sounds on the metal floor. A few aliens looked at her as she passed. Some seemed curious. Others just ignored her. She was used to it. Humans were still new to most of the galaxy, and she was smaller than most humans. When she reached the table, the 3 contractors were talking about some mining operation on a moon near Vega. Korvac was explaining how his warriors could clear out dangerous wildlife in just a few days. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "Excuse me?" Hana said in a clear voice. "I am Hana Kim from Earth Colony Development. I sent you a message about the terraforming contract on Kepler 402b. The 3 aliens stopped talking and looked at her. For a moment, nobody said anything. Then Korvac started to laugh. It was a strange sound, like metal scraping against metal. Threx joined in with his own laugh, which sounded like rocks falling down a hill. Even Velith made a high whistling sound that must have been her version of laughter. "This is what Earth sends to negotiate heavy construction contracts," Korvac said, pointing one of his claws at her. The claw was bigger than her hand. A tiny thing that looks like it would break if someone breathed on it too hard. Threx leaned forward with all 4 of his arms on the table. "Are you sure you are fully grown, little human? You are smaller than most of the children of my species." Hana kept her face calm. She had expected this reaction. It happened often when she met new alien species for the first time. "I assure you I am qualified for this job. I have 15 years of experience in terraforming operations, and I have managed projects worth billions of credits." This made them laugh even harder. Korvac slapped the table with his claw, making a loud bang that caused other aliens in the cantina to look over. 15 years? But you look like you were born yesterday. How old are humans when they start working? 5 years. Old. Maybe she is some kind of human pet, Velith said in her sharp voice, sent here to amuse us while the real negotiators are somewhere else. Hana reached into her bag and pulled out a data tablet. If you would look at these specifications, you will see that this is a serious project. We need to move 12 billion tons of rock and install atmosphere processors across 4 continents. The timeline is aggressive, but the pay is very good. She held out the tablet, but none of them took it. Instead, Korvac waved his claw dismissively. We do not have time to Play games with human children. Come back when your species sends someone who can actually do the job. The job requires precision and careful planning, Hana continued. The ecosystem we are building must be perfect or the colonists will not survive. I have designed similar systems on 6 other worlds. Threx made a rumbling sound in his chest. 6 other worlds. What did you do, move some pebbles around and plant a few seeds? Real construction work requires strength. It requires beings who can lift heavy equipment and work in dangerous conditions. Look at yourself, human. You are so small I could pick you up with one hand. Size is not the only factor in successful construction, Hana said. Intelligence and experience matter more than physical strength in modern terraforming. The 3 aliens exchanged looks and started laughing again. Other aliens in the cantina began to notice the commotion. Some moved closer to listen. Hana could feel dozens of eyes watching her. Velith stood up from her chair. Even though she was the thinnest of the 3 contractors, she was still almost 7 feet tall. Intelligence, experience, little human. I have been in construction for over 200 years. Korvac has led warrior engineers through hostile environments that would kill your entire species. And Threx has moved mountains on 50 different worlds. What could you possibly teach us? I am not here to teach you, Hana said patiently. I'm here to hire you. The Earth Colonial Authority has approved a budget of 800 million credits for this project. That would be split among the primary contractors. The mention of money made them pause for a moment. 800 million credits was a lot, even for contractors of their level. But then Korvac shook his massive head. Even if the money is real, how could we trust such an important project to someone like you? You probably need help opening doors. Do you even know what a plasma cutter is? I have operated plasma cutters, fusion welders, and gravity hammers, Hana replied. I am certified in zero-atmosphere construction and have worked in gravitational fields from 0.3 to 2.4 standard. This made them laugh the hardest yet. Threx was laughing so hard he had tears coming from his 4 eyes. Gravity hammers? Those tools weigh more than you do, small human. Are you telling us you can lift equipment that weighs 3 times your body weight? Human exoskeletons and mechanical assists make physical strength less important than it used to be, Hana explained. Ah yes, your machines, Velith said with a mocking tone. Humans always rely on their little gadgets because they are too weak to do real work. What happens when your machines break? What happens when you have to work with your actual body? The conversation was attracting more attention. A crowd of aliens had formed around the table. Some were other contractors who knew Korvac, Threx, and Velith. Others were just curious about the small human who was trying to negotiate with some of the toughest aliens in the sector. Hana looked around at the growing crowd. She had handled difficult negotiations before, but never with this many witnesses. Every word she said was being judged by dozens of aliens who already seemed convinced that humans were weak and useless. Perhaps we could discuss the technical details, she suggested. I have detailed plans for the atmospheric processing system and the geological surveys. Technical details. Korvac stood up to his full height of nearly 9 feet. Small human, the only detail that matters is whether you can do the job. And looking at you, I do not think you could even carry your own tools, let alone manage a project of this size. The crowd murmured in agreement. Hana realized that this was not just about getting the contract anymore. This was becoming a public demonstration of human weakness in front of some of the most powerful aliens in the sector. If she failed here, word would spread quickly. Other humans might find it even harder to get work in this part of the galaxy. She took a deep breath and prepared to try a different approach when the cantina suddenly became very quiet. The silence spread through the cantina like a wave. Every alien stopped talking and turned toward the entrance. Even Korvac, Threx, and Velith went quiet and looked over Hana's shoulder. She could feel the temperature in the room seem to drop several degrees. Heavy footsteps echoed through the cantina. Each step sounded like a hammer hitting metal. The crowd of aliens around Hana's table moved aside quickly, creating a clear path. Some of the smaller aliens actually left the cantina entirely. Others pressed themselves against the walls, Hana turned around to see what had caused such a reaction. What she saw made her understand why everyone was afraid. Walking toward them was the largest alien she had ever seen in person. He stood at least 8 feet tall and was built like a living weapon. His skin was dark gray, almost black, with a texture that looked like leather armor. His arms were as thick as tree trunks and ended in hands with claws that could probably tear through steel. His face was angular and sharp, with eyes that glowed yellow in the cantina's lights. 2 rows of teeth showed when he opened his mouth, each tooth as long as Hana's thumb. This had to be a shadow maw. She had read about them but never expected to see one. They were apex predators from a world where everything was dangerous. Most shadow maw never left their home planet because they found the rest of the galaxy too boring. The few that did become mercenaries, bounty hunters, or worse. The massive alien walked straight toward their table. Other aliens moved out of his way without being asked. His yellow eyes looked around the room and finally settled on the small group at the table. When he spoke, his voice was deep enough that Hana could feel it in her chest. "What is all the noise about?" he asked. I could hear laughing from 3 levels down. Korvac, who had seemed so confident and aggressive just moments before, now looked nervous. "Dorak, we did not expect to see you on this station. We were just conducting some business." So his name was Dorak. Hana filed that information away. She had learned to remember the names of dangerous people, and Dorak definitely qualified as dangerous. Dorak's glowing eyes moved from Korvac to Hana. He studied her for several seconds, tilting his head slightly like a predator examining potential prey. "This is what you were laughing about? A small human?" "She claims to be a contractor," Threx said, speaking more quietly than before. "She wants to hire us for some terraforming project, but look at her, Dorak. She is tiny. She probably weighs less than your arm." Dorak walked closer to Hana. She had to tilt her head back to look up at him. This close, she could smell something like metal and ozone coming from his skin. His claws made small clicking sounds when he moved his fingers. "I have heard rumors about humans," Dorak said slowly. "Some say they are weak, others say they are dangerous. I have never met one before today." He looked down at Hana with those glowing yellow eyes. "You do look very small." "Size is not everything," Hana said, trying to keep her voice steady. Standing this close to Dorak was like standing next to a barely controlled explosion. She could feel the power in his body, the potential for violence just under the surface. Dorak made a sound that might have been laughter, but it sounded more like a growl. "Size is not everything? That is what weak creatures always say. But in the real universe, strength matters. Power matters. The ability to crush your enemies matters." The crowd around them grew larger. Word was spreading through the cantina that Dorak the Shadow Maw was talking to the small human. More aliens came to watch. Some even came down from the upper levels of the cantina. "I am curious about something," Dorak continued. "These rumors about humans being dangerous, are they true? Or are humans really just weak little creatures who hide behind their machines?" Hana could sense where this was going. She had been in enough dangerous situations to recognize when someone was working up to violence. "I think humans and Shadow Maw probably have different definitions of strength." "Do we?" Dorak smiled, showing all of his sharp teeth. "Then perhaps we should test these different definitions." Korvac leaned forward in his chair. "Dorak, surely you are not serious. She is barely the size of a child. It would not be a fair fight." "Who said anything about fighting?" Dorak asked. "I am talking about a simple test, a demonstration." He looked back down at Hana. "If humans are truly strong, then this should be easy for you." The cantina became even quieter. Aliens who had been talking at other tables stopped their conversations. The only sounds were the hum of the station's air recycling system and the distant noise of machinery. "What kind of test?" Hana asked, though she suspected she already knew. Dorak spread his arms wide. "Simple. I will stand right here. You try to move me. If you can push me back even one step, just one single step, then I will personally recommend you to every contractor in this sector. I will tell them that humans are strong and capable. And if I cannot move you? Hana asked. Then you admit that humans are weak and you leave the station. You go back to your little colony worlds and stop pretending you can do the work of real species. The crowd murmured with excitement. This was better entertainment than most aliens saw in months. Some of them started placing bets immediately. Hana could hear credits changing hands as aliens wagered on the outcome. She looked around at the faces watching her. Most showed amusement or curiosity. A few looked concerned, probably wondering if they were about to see a human get hurt. But she did not see any faces that showed confidence in her abilities. This is ridiculous, Velith said. Dorak weighs at least 4 times what she does. He could probably stand on 1 foot, and she still could not move him. Exactly, Threx agreed. This is not a test of strength. This is a demonstration of why humans should not try to compete with real species. Hana studied Dorak carefully. He was big, probably close to 400 pounds of muscle and bone. His feet were planted wide in a stable stance. His center of gravity was low. From a purely physical standpoint, moving him would be nearly impossible for someone her size, but she had not survived 15 years in dangerous construction work by giving up when things looked impossible. I accept your challenge, she said clearly. The crowd erupted in surprised chatter. Several aliens laughed out loud. Someone in the back of the crowd shouted something about easy money. Dorak's smile grew wider. Excellent. I was hoping you would be brave enough to try. But I have one condition, Hana continued. I need 10 minutes to prepare. This caused even more laughter. Dorak looked genuinely amused. 10 minutes? What could you possibly do in 10 minutes that would help you move me? Personal preparation, Hana said. Mental and physical readiness. Surely an experienced hunter like yourself understands the importance of preparation. Dorak considered this. Very well, 10 minutes. But no tools, no weapons, no outside help, just you and whatever strength you have in that small body. Agreed, Hana said. Someone in the crowd started a countdown timer on their wrist device. The display showed 10 minutes, in bright red numbers that everyone could see. As the timer began counting down, the betting became more intense. Aliens were shouting odds and waving credits in the air. As far as Hana could tell, every single bet was against her. The odds were something like 50-1 in Dorak's favor. Korvac shook his massive head. This is madness. That human is going to get herself hurt. Maybe that is the point, Velith said coldly. Maybe she needs to learn that the universe is not safe for weak species. Threx was already calculating profits. When this is over, we should make sure word spreads to other stations. Humans need to understand their place in the galactic community. Hana walked to an empty chair and sat down. She closed her eyes and tried to block out the noise of the crowd. 10 minutes was not much time, but it might be enough. She began running through everything she knew about shadow maw physiology. She remembered reading research papers about their species during her xenobiology studies. They were incredibly strong, but their strength came with certain limitations. Their nervous systems were optimized for quick, powerful movements, not for sustained resistance to specific types of pressure. More importantly, their balance systems worked differently than human balance systems. They relied heavily on inner ear structures that could be disrupted if you knew exactly where and how to apply pressure. The crowd continued to grow. Aliens were coming from other parts of the station to watch the spectacle. Some were recording everything on their personal devices. By tomorrow, this would probably be spread across half the galaxy. Hana opened her eyes and looked at her hands. Her fingers were steady. Her breathing was calm. She had been in worse situations than this, though admittedly not many. The timer showed 7 minutes remaining. She thought about her options. Direct physical force would not work. Dorak was simply too big and too strong. But there were other ways to move an object besides pushing it straight back. Physics was full of alternatives that most people never considered. 6 minutes. Hana stood up and walked closer to Dorak. She wanted to observe his stance more carefully. He was confident, maybe overconfident. His feet were planted wide for maximum stability. His arms were crossed over his chest. He was not even bothering to brace himself properly. Having second thoughts, little human? He asked. Just making sure I understand the rules, Hana replied. I need to move you backward one step. Any method is acceptable as long as I do not use tools or weapons. That is 3 minutes left on the timer. Hana sat perfectly still in her chair while chaos swirled around her. The cantina had become a festival of gambling and excitement. Aliens were shouting bets, arguing about odds, and pushing closer to get a better view. Some had climbed onto tables and chairs. Others hung from the ceiling supports. The noise was incredible, but Hana had learned to focus in loud environments during her military training years ago. She watched Dorak from across the room. The massive shadow maw had not moved from his position near the center of the cantina. His arms were still crossed and his feet were planted wide. He looked completely relaxed, like someone waiting for a child to finish playing a game. Occasionally he would say something to other aliens in the crowd, which would cause more laughter. What the crowd could not see was that Hana was studying every detail of Dorak's body. The way he shifted his weight from one foot to the other, the rhythm of his breathing, the angle of his head when he turned to talk to someone. She was building a mental map of his physiology and looking for weaknesses. Shadow maw were incredible predators, but they had evolved for hunting specific types of prey on their homeworld. Their strength and speed were designed for quick attacks and overwhelming force. They were not built to resist careful, precise pressure applied to specific nerve clusters. 2 minutes remaining. Hana reached down and made a small adjustment to her boots. To anyone watching, it would look like she was just fidgeting nervously. In reality, she was activating the magnetic grips built into the soles. The boots were designed for working in zero gravity or on metal surfaces where normal traction was not available. She set them to partial activation, which would give her extra stability without being obvious. Next, she flexed her fingers and made sure her work gloves were properly fitted. The gloves had micro-servos in the fingertips and palms to help with gripping heavy tools and machinery. They could increase her grip strength by about 30%, which might be just enough for what she had planned. The crowd was getting more excited as the timer counted down. Someone had started a chant of 10, 10, 10, referring to the 10-to-1 odds against Hana. Other aliens picked it up until half the cantina was chanting. Korvac was shaking his head and talking to Threx. I almost feel bad for her. She has no idea what she's getting into. Maybe this will teach other humans not to overestimate themselves, Threx replied. It could save lives in the long run. Velith was watching Hana with her sharp eyes. Look at her. She is just sitting there like she is meditating. Does she think this is some kind of spiritual exercise? 1 minute left. Hana stood up slowly and walked toward Dorak. The crowd quieted down a little, sensing that the show was about to begin. She stopped about 6 feet away from the massive alien and looked up at him. Ready, little human? Dorak asked. His voice carried easily over the noise of the crowd. Almost, Hana replied. She used these final seconds to confirm her target area. At the base of Dorak's skull, just behind his ears, was a cluster of nerve endings that controlled balance and motor coordination in shadow maw. It was a design flaw in their nervous system that had never been a problem on their homeworld, but it could be exploited if you knew exactly where to strike. The timer reached 0, and a loud alarm sounded throughout the cantina. Time is up, someone shouted from the crowd. Dorak spread his arms wide in a gesture of invitation. Come then, small human. Show me this legendary human strength. Hana walked closer until she was standing directly in front of him. The size difference was even more dramatic up close. His chest was level with the top of her head. His arms were longer than her entire torso. If this had been a normal test of strength, she would have no chance at all. She reached up and placed both hands on his chest, as if she was going to try to push him backward in the most obvious way possible. The crowd erupted in fresh laughter. This was exactly what they had expected to see. Is that your plan? Dorak asked, looking down at her with amusement. You are going to push me? Something like that, Hana said quietly. She pretended to strain against his chest, putting effort into a pointless pushing motion. Dorak did not even brace himself. He was so confident that she could not move him that he was not taking any precautions. This was exactly what she had hoped for. "Try harder, little human," he said with a grin. "I can barely feel your touch." The crowd was loving this. Aliens were cheering and laughing and placing even more bets. Some were recording everything to share with friends on other stations. This was going to be talked about for years. But while everyone was focused on her hands pushing against Dorak's chest, Hana was actually preparing for something completely different. She was calculating angles and timing her breathing to match his. Her magnetic boots were locked onto the metal floor, giving her a stable base. Her servo-assisted gloves were ready to provide extra grip strength when needed. "Maybe you should try using both hands," someone in the crowd suggested mockingly. Hana suddenly shifted her strategy. Instead of continuing the useless pushing motion, she stepped to the side and moved behind Dorak. The crowd thought she was giving up or trying a different angle. Even Dorak seemed confused by the movement. "Where are you going, little human?" he asked, starting to turn around. That was the moment Hana had been waiting for. As Dorak began to turn, his balance shifted slightly. His weight moved from both feet to primarily his left foot. His neck was exposed as he looked over his shoulder to see where she had gone. Hana struck with surgical precision. Her right hand shot up to the base of his skull, fingers finding the exact nerve cluster she had been targeting. She applied pressure with her servo-enhanced grip, not hard enough to cause permanent damage, but enough to disrupt the nerve signals that controlled his balance and motor functions. The effect was immediate. Dorak's eyes went wide with shock as his nervous system misfired. His balance, which had been perfect just seconds before, suddenly became unreliable. His left foot stumbled as conflicting signals reached his muscles. At the same moment, Hana used her left hand to grab his belt and pull him further off balance. Her magnetic boots kept her firmly anchored to the floor, while she used her entire body as a lever. It was not brute strength that moved Dorak. It was physics and biology working together. The massive shadow maw took one involuntary step backward, then another. His arms windmilled as he tried to regain his balance. For a few seconds he managed to stay upright, but the nerve disruption made it impossible for him to coordinate his movements properly. The crowd went silent. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. The small human had actually moved Dorak. Not only moved him, but made him stumble backward like he was drunk. "What did you do?" Dorak demanded, his voice no longer confident and amused. He was angry now and more than a little confused. "I won the challenge," Hana said calmly. "You moved backward. More than one step, actually." But she could see in his glowing eyes that the game was over. The nerve strike had only temporary effects. His balance was already starting to return, and now he was furious instead of amused. The crowd could sense the change in mood. What had started as entertainment was about to become something much more dangerous. Dorak's hands curled into fists, his claws extended to their full length. "You used some kind of trick, some human deception." "I used knowledge and technique," Hana replied. "The same things humans use to succeed in construction work." "Tricks," Dorak snarled. "You did not overpower me with strength. You used some kind of nerve manipulation. That is not real strength." The crowd began to back away. They could see where this was heading. Dorak was a predator who had just been embarrassed in front of hundreds of witnesses. His reputation was built on being unstoppable, and a small human had just made him look weak. "The challenge was to move you backward," Hana said, not backing down despite the obvious danger. "I accomplished that goal using human methods: intelligence, preparation, and precise technique." "Human methods," Dorak repeated, his voice getting deeper and more threatening. "Cowardly methods, weak methods. Real strength comes from power, not from sneaky little tricks." He took a step toward her, his claws reflecting the cantina's lights. "Let me show you what real strength looks like, little human." The crowd scattered. Tables and chairs were pushed aside as aliens rushed to get out of the way. In seconds, a wide circle had formed around Hana and Dorak. She was alone in the center with an apex predator who was no longer interested in games or challenges. Hana did not run. She did not call for help. She stood her ground and prepared for what was coming. Next, because she knew something that Dorak did not know, something that none of the aliens in the cantina knew about humans. They thought the nerve strike was her only trick, her only advantage. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Dorak crouched slightly, his muscles tensing for a charge, his yellow eyes fixed on her like targeting systems. When he spoke, his voice was barely more than a growl. "Now you face the real test, human. Let us see how your tricks work against actual violence." Hana flexed her fingers and adjusted her stance. Her boots gripped the metal floor. Her breathing stayed calm and controlled. "Come on then," she said quietly. Dorak launched himself forward with the speed of a striking snake. 400 pounds of muscle and bone moved faster than most aliens could follow. His claws were extended like knives, aimed directly at Hana's chest. The attack was meant to end everything in one devastating strike. But Hana was not there when his claws arrived. She had moved sideways at the last possible second, sliding under his reaching arms like water flowing around a rock. Her magnetic boots kept her stable as she pivoted, using Dorak's own momentum against him. The massive shadow maw crashed into the space where she had been standing, his claws scraping deep grooves in the metal floor. The crowd gasped. Several aliens who had been recording stopped their devices, thinking they were about to witness a murder. Others pressed closer, unable to look away from what was happening. Dorak spun around with surprising speed for someone his size. His yellow eyes blazed with fury and confusion. "Hold still, little human. Fight like a warrior instead of running like prey." "I am not running," Hana said calmly. She was moving in a slow circle around him, always staying just out of reach. "I am fighting smart." He charged again, this time trying to grab her with both hands instead of using his claws. If he could get hold of her, the fight would be over instantly. His arms were long enough that he should have been able to catch her easily. But again, Hana was not where he expected her to be. She ducked under his grasping hands and moved behind him. As he turned to follow her movement, she struck again at the nerve cluster behind his ear. Not as precisely as before because he was moving, but enough to make him stumble. "Stop that," Dorak roared. He swung his arm backward, trying to catch her while she was close. The blow would have broken bones if it had connected, but Hana was already moving away. The aliens in the crowd were starting to realize that something unusual was happening. This was not the quick execution they had expected to see. The small human was actually holding her own against one of the most dangerous predators in known space. "How is she doing that?" Threx whispered to Korvac. "I do not know," the Vorthek replied. "She moves like she can predict what he is going to do." Velith was watching with her sharp eyes focused on every detail. "Look at her feet. Those boots are not standard human footwear. And her gloves have some kind of enhancement system. But even with enhanced equipment, what Hana was doing should have been impossible. Dorak was faster and stronger than any human could ever be. He had centuries of experience in combat. He should have been able to overwhelm her through pure physical superiority. The problem was that Dorak had never fought anyone like Hana before. Most of his opponents relied on strength or speed or natural weapons. They fought the way he fought, trading blow for blow until the stronger one won. Hana was fighting an entirely different kind of battle. She was using distance and timing instead of strength. Every time he attacked, she was somewhere else. Every time he tried to corner her, she slipped away. And whenever he left an opening, she struck at his nervous system to disrupt his coordination. "This is impossible," Dorak snarled. Sweat was starting to form on his dark skin. Fighting at full speed was exhausting even for a shadow maw, especially when none of his attacks were connecting. "Humans learned to fight differently than other species," Hana explained, still circling him like a shark around wounded prey. "We were not the biggest or fastest predators on our world. We had to be smarter." Dorak tried a new strategy. Instead of charging at her, he moved to block her path to the cantina exit. If he could trap her in a corner, her mobility advantage would disappear. But Hana had no intention of running away. When he moved toward the exit, she moved toward the center of the room. She was not trying to escape. She was trying to tire him out. "Stand and fight," Dorak demanded. "Face me with honor instead of dancing around like a coward." Honor is a luxury that weak species cannot afford, Hana replied. She was breathing harder now, but her voice was still steady. We learned to survive by any means necessary. The comment hit Dorak like a physical blow. Being called weak was the ultimate insult to a shadow maw. His species prided themselves on being apex predators, the strongest and most dangerous beings in their part of the galaxy. With a roar of pure rage, Dorak abandoned all strategy and launched into a berserker charge. He came at her with everything. He had claws and teeth and 400 pounds of muscle focused on a single goal, tearing the small human apart. This was exactly what Hana had been waiting for. When an opponent lost control and attacked with pure emotion instead of tactics, they became predictable. Dorak was no longer fighting smart. He was just trying to hurt her as much as possible, which meant his movements followed straight lines and simple patterns. Hana timed her response perfectly. As Dorak reached for her with both hands, she dropped low and swept her leg behind his ankles. At the same time, she struck upward at his solar plexus with her right fist. The sweep alone would not have been enough to bring down someone his size. The punch alone would not have had enough force to stop his charge. But combined with his own forward momentum and his off-balance state from the berserker attack, the two techniques created a chain reaction. Dorak's feet tangled as he tried to step over her leg sweep. His forward momentum carried him into her rising punch. The blow caught him right in the center of his chest, in the cluster of nerves that controlled breathing and shadow maw physiology. For a split second, Dorak could not breathe. His nervous system sent conflicting signals to his lungs and diaphragm. His forward charge became a stumble, then a fall. The massive alien crashed to the floor with a sound like thunder. The metal decking actually dented under his weight. He rolled twice before coming to a stop against an overturned table. The cantina went completely silent. Dorak lay still for several seconds, gasping for breath. When he finally managed to sit up, his yellow eyes were filled with something that had probably never been there before. Uncertainty. "What are you?" he asked in a voice much quieter than before. "I am human," Hana said simply. She was standing over him, not threatening but not backing away either. "This is what we do when someone tries to kill us." The crowd of aliens stared in shock. They had just watched a small human female knock down one of the most dangerous predators in known space. Not with luck or accident, but with skill and planning and perfect execution. Dorak slowly got to his feet. His movements were careful now, wary. The overconfident predator was gone, replaced by someone who had learned a hard lesson about underestimating opponents. "The challenge is over," he said formally. "You moved me backward, as agreed. I will honor my commitment to recommend you to other contractors." But Hana could see in his eyes that this was not over. The challenge had been won, but his pride had been damaged beyond repair. Being defeated by a small human in front of hundreds of witnesses was not something a shadow maw could simply forget and forgive. She also knew that word of this fight would spread throughout the station within hours. Every alien would hear about how the tiny human had knocked down Dorak, the apex predator. Some would be impressed. Others would be angry that their assumptions about human weakness had been proven wrong. Either way, her life had just become much more complicated. "The challenge is complete," Hana agreed. "But I think we both know this is not finished." Dorak's smile was cold and full of sharp teeth. "No, little human, this is definitely not finished." The crowd began to disperse slowly. Aliens talked in hushed voices as they left the cantina. Some were still trying to process what they had seen. Others were already planning how to use this information. Korvac, Threx, and Velith approached Hana's position cautiously. The three contractors who had been laughing at her just minutes ago now looked at her with completely different expressions. "Perhaps," Korvac said carefully, "we should discuss that terraforming contract after all." 3 days had passed since the confrontation with Dorak, and the entire station was still talking about it. Hana had signed contracts with Korvac, Threx, and Velith that very same evening. The terraforming project was now fully funded and staffed, with the best contractors in the sector. She should have been celebrating. Instead, She was sitting in her temporary quarters, reviewing security reports and watching her back. Word of the fight had spread beyond Kepler's rest faster than she had expected. Other stations were sending messages asking for details. Some human colonies had heard rumors and wanted confirmation. Even Earth Colonial Authority had sent an encrypted communication asking if the reports were accurate. But the most troubling development was the growing crowd of aliens who kept arriving at the station. Some came to see the human who had defeated a Shadow Maw. Others came looking for Dorak, wondering if the legendary predator had really been beaten by such a small opponent. A few came looking for trouble. Hana was reviewing her departure schedule when her door chime sounded. She checked the security display and saw Dorak standing in the corridor outside her quarters. He was alone, which was either a good sign or a very bad one. She opened the door but did not invite him inside. "What do you want?" "To finish our conversation," Dorak said. His voice was calm, but she could see the tension in his posture. 3 days of humiliation had not improved his mood. "I thought we finished it in the cantina. The challenge is finished. The contract negotiations are finished, but the real question remains unanswered." "What question?" "What are humans, really?" Dorak stepped closer to the doorway, though he did not try to enter without permission. 3 days ago I thought I knew. Small, weak, dependent on technology. But you showed me something different. Hana studied his face carefully. She could not tell if this was genuine curiosity or if he was planning another attack. "We are what we have always been. Survivors." "That nerve strike you used, the way you moved, the techniques you employed, those were not the actions of a weak species." "No," Hana agreed. "They were not." "So the rumors about human weakness are false?" "The rumors about human weakness are incomplete." Hana leaned against the doorframe, keeping her hands free in case she needed to defend herself. "We are not weak. We are also not strong in the way that most aliens understand strength." Dorak considered this. "Then what kind of strength do humans possess?" Before Hana could answer, an alarm began sounding throughout the station. The emergency lights activated, bathing the corridor in red. An automated voice echoed through the comm system. "Security alert. Armed hostiles detected in Sector 7. All civilians report to designated safe areas immediately." Hana and Dorak looked at each other. Sector 7 was the main commercial district, where most of the cantinas and shops were located. It was also where crowds of aliens had been gathering to hear stories about their fight. "This could be related to our situation," Hana said. "Almost certainly." Dorak's hand moved to the weapon at his belt. "Some of my enemies may have decided that my defeat makes me vulnerable." More alarms began sounding. The automated voice provided updates. Multiple armed groups detected. Station security requesting immediate assistance from all qualified personnel. Hana made a decision that surprised both of them. "Come on, we should help." "We should help?" Dorak stared at her. 3 days ago I tried to kill you. 3 days ago you were testing me. Today innocents are in danger." She grabbed her equipment belt from inside her quarters. "Besides, this is probably our fault anyway." They ran through the corridors toward Sector 7. Other aliens were moving in the opposite direction, following evacuation procedures. The few security officers they passed looked overwhelmed and outnumbered. When they reached the main commercial area, the situation was worse than the alarms had suggested. At least 30 armed aliens were scattered throughout the district, some in organized groups and others acting independently. Most appeared to be mercenaries or bounty hunters looking for easy targets. "There!" someone shouted when they spotted Dorak. "The Shadow Maw who lost to a human. He must be weak now." A group of 6 heavily armed aliens immediately opened fire. Energy blasts filled the air, destroying storefronts and vendor stalls. Civilians screamed and ran for cover. Hana and Dorak dove behind an overturned cargo container. Energy blasts scorched the metal above their heads. "This is definitely our fault," Hana said. "Agreed." Dorak checked his weapon. "How do you want to handle this?" The question surprised her. The apex predator was asking for her tactical opinion. "Take the group on the left. I'll handle the ones on the right." There are 8 aliens on the right and only 6 on the left. I know. Dorak looked at her for a moment, then nodded. Very well. They split up and attacked simultaneously. Dorak charged the left group with a roar that echoed through the district. His natural weapons and predator instincts made short work of the 6 mercenaries. Claws and teeth were brutally effective against opponents who had expected to face a weakened opponent. On the right side, Hana faced 8 aliens of various species. They had spread out to surround her position, thinking that superior numbers would guarantee victory. They had made the same mistake that Dorak had made 3 days earlier. They underestimated what humans were capable of. The first alien to reach her was a Vorthak warrior similar to Korvac, but smaller and less experienced. He swung a massive warhammer at her head with enough force to crush concrete. Hana ducked under the swing and struck at the nerve cluster in his elbow. His arm went numb, and the hammer fell from his grasp. A Nixari assassin tried to flank her while she was dealing with the Vorthak. Her blade-like appendages could cut through most armor, but they were useless if she could not connect with her target. Hana used the stumbling Vorthak as a shield, then grabbed the Nixari's wrist and redirected her attack into her own ally. 2 Grimaldi brothers attacked together, thinking their 4 arms each would overwhelm her. But having more arms just meant having more joints that could be struck and disabled. Hana moved between them like a dancer, striking pressure points and nerve clusters with surgical precision. Within seconds, both Grimaldi were on the ground, their arms useless. The remaining 4 aliens began to hesitate. They had expected an easy fight against a small human, but instead, they were watching their comrades fall one by one to an opponent, who barely came up to their chests. One of them, a reptilian species she did not recognize, raised his hands in surrender. Wait, we yield. But the others were not ready to give up. A massive alien that looked like a walking tree fired an energy weapon at close range. Hana rolled aside and came up next to his legs. She struck at the knee joint with her servo-enhanced fist. The sound of breaking bone echoed through the district. The tree-like alien toppled like timber, crashing into a nearby shop. The remaining 2 mercenaries looked at each other, then at Hana, then ran as fast as they could in the opposite direction. The entire fight had lasted less than 3 minutes. Hana looked around the commercial district. Other groups of mercenaries were retreating or surrendering to station security. The ones who had come looking for easy prey had instead found organized resistance and superior tactics. Dorak approached her position, his claws still stained with the evidence of his own battle. 8 opponents, he said with something that might have been respect. You defeated 8 experienced mercenaries without taking a single injury. Training, Hana said simply. And they made it easy by underestimating me. As I did. As you did. They stood together in the wreckage of the commercial district, surrounded by unconscious or fleeing mercenaries. Station security was beginning to arrive in force, though the real fighting was already over. I understand now, Dorak said quietly. The rumors about human weakness exist because humans want them to exist. You use others' assumptions as a weapon. We use whatever advantages we can find. Hana looked around at the scattered opponents. On Earth, we were never the biggest or strongest or fastest. We had to be smarter, we had to be better at adapting. And now you bring those skills to the galaxy. Now we bring those skills to the galaxy. Dorak was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that had not been there before. The other species need to know about this. Not the stories and rumors, but the reality. Humans are not weak. You are perhaps the most dangerous species any of us have encountered. Why? Because we can fight? No. Because you can win. He looked down at her with his yellow eyes. Every species in this galaxy understands strength. We know how to deal with opponents who are bigger or faster or more heavily armed. But humans fight with intelligence and deception and techniques that most of us have never seen before. You turn our own advantages against us. Station security reached their position. The security chief, a professional-looking alien with multiple arms and eyes, surveyed the scene with obvious amazement. Preliminary reports indicate that 2 individuals neutralized over 30 armed hostiles, he said. Is this accurate? More or less, Hana replied. The security chief looked back and forth between the small human and the massive shadow maw. How? Teamwork, Dorak said with what might have been humor. Over the following days, word of the second fight spread even faster than news of the first one had.